Hey, I'm Ben Silverio.
I'm Erin Klein.
And I'm Ansel Birch, your host in post.
And it's
Time to party.
We are not doctors and we don't give medical advice. Please drink responsibly. This episode was recorded October 11th of 2020.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the last installment of our episodes about Time Bandits. It's our edutainment session. It's the lazy river of information. We're not taking a deep dive. It's just just a little trip down a lazy river. Sometimes it's an adventure river. There's a little extra, but mostly just a lazy river of information.
Sometimes there's audio animatronics along the way. Sometimes there's a giant elephant, like, squirting water at you or something.
Yep, exactly. That's me coming in with, like, here's the first time a prosthetic hand was invented. Would you like to go first, Ben?
Yeah, because every time I go second, I feel utterly inadequate with information.
I cannot help myself. I'm doing prep and I'm just like, well, I have to read this paper about how prosthetics advanced from World War II, obviously, and take a bunch of notes on it. So I think it's just part of my personality.
It's great. We love you for it.
Yeah.
So, while watching Time Bandits and thinking about what technology I wanted to look into, one of the most interesting pieces of the movie is the map itself and how it guides our gang through time and space with portals, right? So naturally my brain made the connection of GPS, and I wanted to look more into that. So a GPS is a system of 30 plus navigation satellites circling the Earth, and we know where they are because they're constantly sending out signals that are received by a receiver. A lot of the times it's in your phone, and the receiver calculates the distance from 4 or more points of the satellites to figure out where you are. The most interesting thing that I found out about GPS is that this satellite-based radio navigation system, owned by the United States government and operated by the United States Space Force.
I mean, that makes sense.
I had no idea.
Really?
It 100% makes sense, but I never thought, like, oh, Space Force is the one who runs it and who, like, oversees it. And I guess I just never thought about it, and it makes sense since it's in space.
Yeah,
but
it makes sense that they have an agency that's already out there that's like, okay, we can figure this out and make maintenance stops at this if we need to, or like pull it in with an arm at the ISS, as opposed to like, let's create whole cloth a new agency that's going to take care of these things that fly in space and run around our planet over and over. Like, it does make sense that NASA's like, hey, we can do this. It's cool. We got it, guys.
Yeah, I think I just wasn't aware of how involved the United States military was in creating GPS. Because the American GPS was the first satellite navigation system to be fully deployed on a global scale. A bunch of other ones came into play with, like, Russia and Europe and stuff. But, like, the US one was launched for the purpose of the military, and then was opened up to civilians. Whereas Galileo, which is the European equivalent, was conceived purely as civilian at first. So, you know, the US always doing things for war.
I was going to say, I'm not super surprised that the US was like, you know, we should prioritize the military. And Europe is like, you know what, we should maybe prioritize people who are alive and exist and need this. Like, people who are like, I want to get to my grandma's house. And the US is like, we definitely want to kill people in other countries. Let's figure out how to do that. Like, yeah, that's on brand. That's super on brand.
It was around 1990 when built-in GPS started to, like, really blow up for consumers. In 1990, Mazda was the first ones to put GPS built into one of their cars. So it's interesting. I was born in 89, so GPS was really mostly available for as long as I've been on this earth, you know? So that it's something that you don't think of, because, like, I use GPS so much. Like, I wouldn't be able to get around half the places I go to without GPS. And it's still a relatively young technology, and it's still evolving.
Yeah, I agree. I was born in 88, and so I like, remember GPS not being everywhere for a little while, but, like, basically by the time I was in high school, like, everyone had some kind of GPS if you had a car. That's really interesting that it was Mazda first, too. Like, you don't think of Mazda as, like, the innovators of car technology.
Yeah, right.
Or at least I don't. Like,
They're not
Mazda's
exactly...
they're a fine car. It's not like they're
Yeah.
bad or anything. It's just like, really? They were the ones that did this? It wasn't, like, BMW or Ferrari or anything? You know, the ones that make race cars?
Yeah, and while I was looking up some more information about GPS, I fell into some clickbaity articles about practical uses for GPS or weird ways to use GPS, and one of them was to find condoms. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, what?
Wait, what?
So it drew me in with the title. It was very clickbaity, and it essentially just tells you where you can get free condoms. So, like, you know,
Cool.
whatever clinics are near you or whatever brands offer, you know, free samples and stuff like this. There's an app that will tell you, you know, where it is and how close it is to your location.
I kind of love that. I think it's great that they make condoms more easily accessible and
100%.
easy for people to find. It is kind of ironic that it's on an app when people who need free condoms are probably not in a great financial position to have a cell phone with an app on it, but you never know. Like, phones are a lot cheaper now, so I'm not, like, super surprised by that, but that also seems very much like a Silicon Valley solution to a problem that doesn't actually take into account all the people who would be using it. But I like the idea of it. I think that that's great. And also that's hilarious that that's like a GPS thing. I guess that totally makes sense.
Yeah. Like, in the same way that you can use your GPS to find the closest Burger King, you can also use it to find the nearest condom shop.
Excellent. Fantastic. I fully support it.
There's this spot in Philly on South Street, which is essentially like Bucktown, but like, you know, on one street. There is this store called Condom Kingdom that's like prominently featured on this street, and it's a sex store. You know, they have a bunch of different condoms, like they have displays to show you what the condoms are like, and like little plaques to educate you on the different kinds of condoms. There are little sperm on the ceiling. It's cute as shit. Like, it's been around forever.
I love it.
I mean, like, it was such a novelty to go down to South Street when I was in high school to like pick out, you know, knockoff t-shirts and then go to Condom Kingdom and fool around with their displays and shit. But really, they were teaching people about, you know, safe sex and things that people should actually know about.
Absolutely. Fucking 100%. Anything that... I love a fun sex shop because it encourages people to actually interact with the things in there and not feel so, like, awkward and, like, I'm doing a dirty thing by going in a sex shop. It's like, no, you're, like, educating yourself and you're learning how to treat yourself and your body better. Like, great. Fucking fantastic.
Yeah.
Highly support.
Sex shops don't have to be the windowless buildings by an airport anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just those weird adult stores. Like, if you want to go to that, fine by me. More power to you. But it's also very easy to walk into a woman-owned sex shop and have a great experience.
It's like looking for fine wine, you know? Ask someone who works at the sex shop and be like, hey, so what brand is good?
Right, like, this is what I'm looking for, or I have no idea what I'm looking for, and they can help you. Like, it's the best. It's great.
More places need to be like Blockbuster, you know?
You know what? I agree, except for the Blockbuster's mostly closed everywhere. Other than that part.
Yeah.
I agree.
Apply that business model to sex shops, and then we're good.
There you go. We have $1 million idea here, Ben.
There we go. That's going to be our next endeavor.
Oh, fair. We're not doing rentals.
No, that's fair. No. Cool. So, Erin, what are you going to edutain us about today?
I'm going to edutain you, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about prosthetics, because there were 2 prosthetic hands in Time Bandits, and I was like, I have to know more. I must know more about prosthetic hands. So, the first one that we see in the movie is Napoleon's gold hand. So, before prosthetic hands became more like what we know them today, where there are a couple of different kinds, which I'll get into later, they were made from iron almost exclusively, and they first started out, the first prosthetic hand was in 77 AD. Pliny the Elder wrote about Marcus Sergius, Sergius, losing his hand in a battle and having it like immediately replaced with an iron hand. But the thing about those is that you had to be able to you had to have some part of your hand left in order to control the way that the iron ones worked, so that you could like hold a lance or like a bow and arrow or whatever. And so those existed for a super fucking long time. They were iron, they were long, they fit all the way onto your arm. Like, prosthetic limbs were basically only given to people like Marcus Sergius, where you're in battle and you've lost a part of your limb. Like, they're kind of the only people who lose limbs really at this point too, and so it makes sense that they're the ones who are like provided with some kind of alternative. So that goes on fucking forever. So let me tell you first about the 3 different kinds of modern hands, or prosthetics. They can go anywhere from partial hands with your fingers or all the way up to your shoulder now. So there are tons of different kinds of prosthetics. Specifically talking about the arm ones, obviously. There are lots of other kinds for the rest of your body as well. So there's 3 different kinds. So there's a passive function, which is a model with no movement. Those are the ones that, like, if you're missing a couple fingers, they'll put, like, it's a metal skeleton with silicone-like skin over the top of it. So they basically just exist as a cosmetic function. It's more like, or if you lose your hand and you're like, you know what, honestly, not interested in using my hand anymore, you can just throw a fake hand on there. That's fine by me. An example of the Iron Hand, like I was talking about earlier, is the character from Game of Thrones, Jaime, who has the gold hand. I think gold hands are super weird. Napoleon had one too. Gold is not a great metal for a prosthetic hand because it's a soft metal, and so if it gets super hot, it will start to deform. And so that's part of the reason they were made out of iron, is because it's very durable. It can get very hot. It can take a lot of damage, and like it won't heat up from your own body heat to the point where like a gold hand could and become kind of deformed. So it's a mark of wealth to have a gold hand, not just because it costs a lot of fucking money, but also because you actually need quite a lot of maintenance for a gold hand as well. So it was interesting to me that that existed and was like a thing that was semi-popular, but again, only with rich people. Another example of a passive function model, if you watch the X-Files, there's a character called Krychek who gets his arm cut off at one point, and he has a passive hand model, which you only see him use to like dunk a tea bag into a cup at one point, and you're like, well, that hand definitely does not work, and is also modeled very weirdly to just be able to use teacups. But that's an example of a passive hand model. The second one...
So it's just modeled like this? Like...
Yes, it's not with a pinky out, but it just looks like this.
Oh, okay.
It's like this weird, like, little claw that he just, like, sticks a tea bag in and then, like, lowers it into his tea. It's very strange. Oh. It's, like, not explained why it's shaped like that either, but that would be an example of, like, passive function because it doesn't actually move. It's just designed, like, oh, I can stick something into the fingers and hold it, but it's not, like, multifunctional. Like a body-powered one is. That's the second kind. I did not know this. When you wear a body-powered one that's not... So body-powered ones mean that you can, like, move your hands, you can, like, open and close them, but you can't articulate your fingers. So your fingers don't move individually, but your hand can, like, pick things up. You can use your hand in more than just a passive cosmetic function. The way that you wear those is that it has a harness that you strap to your torso, and it reads from, you won't be able to see this when you're listening, but it reads from your part of your shoulder where like your middle finger is here, and then up at the top by your collarbone are your other fingers, and that harnesses the electrical power that your nerves fire off, and then that's how those hands work, the body-powered ones, which is fascinating. I'll get into dates when some of this stuff was created. A lot of this technology came way earlier than you think that it did, which I found very fascinating. So the third kind that most people get now is a myoelectric hand. It's the closest thing to a replacement. It doesn't require a harness. The way that it is made is that the nerves in the rest of what is left of your limb, your stump, are wired into the prosthetic, and then those can move your fingers individually. It's not quite the same articulation as a regular hand, but that's the way that the process is moving. Like the future of prosthetic hands is being able to fully articulate your fingers individually, and also one of the things that they're working on that makes sense and I find fascinating is the future is tactile feedback in a prosthetic, so that you can feel the amount of pressure that you're applying, and you can feel your hand opening and closing from inside of your nerves. So it would be like you had your hand replaced, basically. And there was a trial prosthetic at Arizona State University really recently that created a prosthetic that allowed the wearer to feel how much pressure they're having in their hands. So this is like happening. This is going to be a very, very soon step in prosthetic technology. So I found that really interesting looking it up. Here's the other thing that I found fucking fascinating. The first digitally controlled body-powered harness-worn prosthetic hand was invented in 1916. fucking way before I expected. I know, I was shocked.
Holy crap.
It's like basically the second that they were like, electricity, we can figure out how to make this work. Like they like shoves this harness together. I love that idea. It's the first time that they could control digits. And so obviously because you're using a body powered one, so it opens up this like whole world of prosthetics. This is also right after World War I. And so a lot of what drives prosthetic technology is it later becomes factory workers who lose their hands and parts of their arms in industrial accidents. But then the other driver of that are veterans and people who lose their limbs in battle. Again, as we talked about Pliny the Elder talking about Marcus Scarius, is the way that when you are injured in battle, they want to shove you back out there. Military complex.
Yep.
Shove people back out even when they're hurt. So I find it fascinating that like so early on they were like, we've got to make a way to make this easier. We have to find a way either to put people back in battle or like allow them to exist in the rest of life. So 1916 was the first time they had a passive function model with controllable fingers so that they can move but weren't fully controlled. 1919, 3 years later, was when the first harness and externally controlled one. Way earlier than I was expecting. Yep. Like, it's super, super early. Again, post-World War I, right before World War II. And then the next time there's like a big jump in prosthetic technology is 1945, when the creation of the U.S. Committee for Prosthetic Research. This is obviously right around the time that World War II is wrapping up. There's a lot of veterans who are coming back injured who need prosthetic limbs. And so the United States created this commission so that they could basically kind of NASA for prosthetics. Like, that was the whole idea, is that you want to create technology that's usable on a big scale, and the way to do that is to invest government funding into that kind of stuff. And so I thought it was really fascinating that our government cared enough to create a prosthetic research committee, and like is still a thing that gets money from the government. And then again, way earlier than I was expecting, 1948 was the first myoelectric hand, which is nuts. Like 1948, they were already fusing together nerves to create individually digitally controlled prosthetic hands. Like, I think of prosthetics as something very new that seemed like it's very contemporary. And then yet in this research, I found like, this is obviously, when people lose hands, they don't want to not have hands anymore. And so it makes sense that, like, since this has been a problem, humans are like, literally, how do we solve this as soon as possible? We cannot be running around with people with no hands. Like, it's the thing you get paid the most for disability, too. If you lose, like, your thumb on your dominant hand in an industrial accident, you make fucking way more money than any other part of your body, because it's taken away a huge part of what you can do with your hands. And also, it will be very expensive to create a prosthetic that functions in the way that a thumb does. Like, if you lose a pinky and a ring finger, like, those are easier to put, for example, like a passive function model on. But if you lose your thumb, like, you need that. And that's something that they like really push the development of the technology. So the next step is called TMR. It's targeted motor reintegration. And the idea is that they take these nerves that they've bound together with the prosthetics, the myoelectric ones, and they make it so that your nerves basically start to function again. And it wants to press forward in the technology in a way that they want to create electric skin, and so that you basically replace your hand, only you're a cyborg and you get like a fancy metal hand, but it functions almost the same. And so in 2004, this was the first time they tried a TMR prosthetic, and it's one of those things that, like, it's been 16 years, and in the next 16 years, this will become a staple of prosthetics, because this is what people want. They want to be able to functionally replace their hands. There have been hand transplants, but most of the time your body rejects it. The skin graft doesn't work, or the organs inside of your body are like, nah, I don't want this fake hand, get this the fuck out of here. There are a couple of people that have survived for like decades with hand transplants, and there's been one case of a double hand transplant that still was working when I checked on it while we were doing research. But it's not honestly a thing people do very often. And honestly, if I lost a hand, I wouldn't want to try a hand transplant either. I would want a robot hand. I feel like even if I have to wait for the technology to upgrade, it's gonna upgrade, and I'm gonna have a better hand, as opposed to like, well, I have this skin hand, but it might fall off in like 2 years. Like, I'm not interested in that. Give me a fucking robot hand. And that's my lazy river of entertainment about prosthetics. Again, I took 2 full pages of notes.
Holy crap.
I just found it so interesting.
We say lazy river, and I think people are thinking, like, it's a small world, right? With, like, fun facts in each room as the boat's going, right? And then that's pretty much what happens when I'm talking. And then when Erin's talking, it's like
Here's
the
a
Haunted
history
Mansion.
lesson. Yes, it's very
Yeah,
intricate.
it's like-
Everything's connected.
Yeah, there's a bunch of shit going on left and right. Like,
Yes, I really like doing the edutainment sections because I find technology and the integration of technology into our contemporary lives really fascinating. And like, I was shocked by how early prosthetics came about. Like, I was
Yeah, that's
not
crazy.
expecting that. So, yeah, I love a semi-deep dive, I guess.
1919.
I
That's
know!
wild.
That's fucking wild. Like, can you imagine the weird-ass harnesses that they were wearing in 1919 with the prosthetic hand? I bet they were weird. Everything in 1919 was weird. Super weird.
Yeah.
Okay, then. If you could have a prosthetic limb that could give you a super exciting ability, what would it be, and what ability would you want?
Oh man. My instinct was to say, like, Inspector Gadget has the phone in his hand, but my phone can go to my ear pods now.
Mm-hmm.
So
You don't have to, like, hold it up.
exactly, it's not as cool as it was when I was a kid. So I mean, grappling hook hand? Like, I feel that would be very impractical for everyday use, but
but when
I
you got
feel-
to use it, it would be so exciting.
exactly.
Or you just start using it every day. You're like, you know what? I'm done with this conversation. Scoop, and you just grapple hook your way away. Like, bye guys. You just take off. I'm into that.
I would be screwed in like the Midwest where there aren't like a ton of big cities that I can just like grapple away from, you know? Like, what does Spider-Man do in the middle of nowhere, like in Kansas, when he can't web sling from buildings, you know?
Web slings to telephone poles, I guess.
So I think the most practical example, or I mean the most practical like usage I can think of is like have a multi-purpose, like a blender, I guess, or like a stand mixer,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like, I suck at cooking, but like still, if I had this attachment, you know, I could like whip up eggs real nice and
Okay.
make a cake or something.
These are really practical ideas, despite one of them involving a grappling hook. That's a good idea. I like the idea of having like a gadget-like hand that can help you cook.
What would you pick?
My instinct is that I don't know how you have a prosthetic back, but I would love to have a back that turns into a jetpack. That would be pretty fucking cool. Prosthetic spine?
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work. Although my next instinct is that I would want prosthetic eyes that function like a computer. That
Ooh.
you could like, I mean, they would obviously link into your brain and you'd be able to see, but the kind of like the idea of Google Glass, except not shitty, where you can just like pull up information in front of your eyes. Like, that's really appealing to me, especially as somebody who wears glasses and has terrible fucking eyesight. Like, the idea of being able to replace my eyes with something prosthetic that just functions in like a cybernetic way, I think would be really cool. It wouldn't have like a specific function like yours, but it would be like, I just want to access information quickly.
Sure. No, that's a good use of prosthetics, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Would one of your functions be X-ray vision?
I don't know. I don't think so. That's not like I said, I think I would mostly want it just to access information. I wouldn't want it to actually be like an active thing that my prosthetics do that other people can see. I would want it to be an internalized thing that like is specific to my body having been upgraded in a way that's useful to me.
Right. Yeah, like X-ray vision's kind of weird now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's always been kind of weird, but it's very invasive.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. I don't need that. That doesn't seem necessary.
Why are you doing that, Superman?
I need to see inside this building. Like, okay, but that's several feet away, and there are a lot of people in between you and this building, and that seems suspicious.
Did Superman have a super perverted phase when he was a teenager?
100%.
Like, he had to have, right? Like,
yeah, he's like, I'm mad at you, Mom and Dad. I'm gonna go look through this wall into this gym locker room. Okay, Clark, whatever you want.
Porky's would have been a lot different if Clark Kent
Right?
was the star.
Clark Kent's like, listen, guys, I got this. Just drill a
Glory
little hole.
holes.
Yeah, exactly.
Forget that.
He's like, I'll just drill a little hole with my eyes, and I can see through it. Everything's fine. Oh, Superman. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our lazy river of edutainment. Once again, a successful ride around the lazy river. A great time.
Absolutely. And while you dry off from this dip into information,
Oh my god.
you can join the conversation with the hashtag time2party. That's the number 2.
You can follow me on Instagram at NYDEarnGenC.
And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at BSilverio20.
You can find me on Twitter at Indecisionist and on Instagram at The Indecisionist. This has been an Indecisionist production. Special thanks to April Moralba for our podcast art and to Marlon Longid of Marlon and the Shakes for our amazing theme song.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We hope that you enjoyed this dive into Time Bandits. If you're watching it again, awesome. If you're like me and you watched it for the first time, congratulations. I hope that you at least enjoyed the last hour.
Yeah,
it was good. It's a good movie. I'm being an asshole.
So until next time, party on, dudes.
Be excellent to each other.
Oh yeah. Why do I keep saying party on first?
I don't know. I like it though. We're just throwing them out there. Upward and onward. I don't know.